I'm going to, everybody that's in here now, I'm going to just introduce our guest today. It's Lorelei, and she's going to be talking about accessibility, talking about plastic straws and the environment and a whole bunch of neat stuff. I'm going to give you the mic and you can continue on here.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm the chair of the Accessibility Advisory Committee for my city in Ontario, and we've recently been really involved in just the conversation around single-use plastics bans because we're really not a fan of some of the items being banned. A lot of people right now are like really on board with things like banning plastic straws and things like that, and as much as it is important for the environment for us to ban some single-use plastics, it's also important to remember that, things like plastic straws are an accessibility device as well. I've been on CBC interviewed me a few days ago about kind of our AAC's take on this. And I'm also a member of the board of directors for the Canadian Centre for Disability Studies. So there's a few areas where I've been exposed to different people who need straws, and I'm actually one of those people too. I'm just really passionate about the fact that, as much as single-use plastics definitely harm the environment, and I'm totally on board with us banning some of them, there are just also people who can't drink without a straw. Like people who have difficulty holding a cup and have different motor function disabilities or issues with grip strength or spasms or any other number of disabilities need straws. And for those people, for a lot of us, the alternate straws that are being proposed don't actually serve our needs and create more barriers for us. So I'm really passionate about the fact that we have a social responsibility to both protect and uplift marginalized communities and take care of the environment. And I don't think those things have to be at odds.
It's a very important discussion for sure, because, it is an accessibility issue for sure, because, you're right. Not everyone can, not have a straw. I mean, drinking out of a cup, it may be good for some people, but some people do need to have the straw, like a plastic straw, right? I mean, I know that there are certain restaurants that use paper straws and you can't grip onto them properly. It's just not, flexible enough, right? Or I don't know, it's just not the same. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. There are actually a ton of reasons that paper is not a great alternative. And that's the main suggested alternative is usually people say, let's do paper straws. McDonald's and Starbucks and all these big corporations are now only offering paper straws. Mm-hmm. And what we're proposing in our city in Guelph with the waste management section of Guelph, we've been talking to the people at the city and then also with city council, we're saying that not only should we not ban plastic straws, but we should enforce that everywhere has to offer plastic straws as well. And even we're going so far as to say that they should be equally available and people shouldn't have to only have them available upon request. And there's a lot of reasons for that I can get into. But the paper straws themselves, people think that that's just a no-brainer. That's perfect and easy to just use a paper straw instead. But there's so many reasons that they're not good. The paper disintegrates over time. So people with disabilities who might take longer to drink a drink will find that their straw stops working halfway through their drink or their soup or whatever it is they're using the straw for. They don't protect well against heat, which plastic does. They present a choking hazard. There have been lots of studies on, people inhaling pieces of plastic straws after they've ripped off in their mouth.
Oh, geez.
There are people with chemical sensitivities and allergies to the chemicals that are used in the process of making straws. It's there are so many. I could go on and on. I don't want to bore anybody, but there's
no. Continue. Yeah, continue.
I was gonna say that I've used paper straws myself, and you're right about even after just 20 seconds, it disintegrates. You can taste the paper in your mouth, little balls of paper end up in your mouth after 20 seconds. It's what?
Yeah.
It's really uncomfortable.
It's you're drinking.
Someone who involuntarily bites down, or if you're helping someone drink something who doesn't have full control over when they're biting and not biting, they can bite off pieces of the straw really easily and inhale it, and that's not good.
What is your opinion about the metal straws? I know metal straws are all the rage now too. What's your opinion about those?
There are so many reasons that I also feel those aren't a great option. So the last thing about paper straws I'll say is just that they can't be bent, and it's the same thing with metal straws. Paper straws can be bent, but they don't snap back into place. So anyone with neck mobility issues has trouble drinking from a straw that can't bend, even if they don't have the like bendy neck, you know? But yeah, metal and glass seem to be the like other alternatives that people want us to use. And those are also not a good alternative for a lot of people with disabilities. I'm one of the people who can't use glass or metal straws. For me, the reason is that like I have part of my multiple sclerosis is that I get random spasticity in my face that causes me to bite down without notice really hard. Like my dentist deserves a Medal of Honor or something because I have bitten her so many times. But yeah, if I were to bite down on like a metal or a glass straw, I'd be likely to injure myself, break a tooth, you know? That's not great. They conduct heat, right? So you're more likely to burn yourself. Something that's just warm makes a straw even hotter than it is because of the way the heat is conducted. They also aren't sanitary. Like if you're someone like me, I'm on infusion treatments that kill my immune system. So it's not a safe option for me to carry a straw around in my purse all day and then like stick it in my mouth, right? And you'd have to bring multiple straws if you want to have multiple drinks. It's not a great alternative. And those are just the like physical reasons that glass and metal and like hard silicone alternatives aren't good. And there's also like social reasons, I think, that those are kind of discriminatory.
Oh yeah, exactly. And you know, there should always be a choice, right? I mean, they should have at least maybe like a supply on hand so that people who do need them, that they are there, not as no option, right? So
Yeah.
a customer can request them, you know, at the place where they're going to, and they should always be there. Yeah, I mean, you know, they have to kind of compromise definitely with people with disabilities because there's so many reasons why that, yeah, like you explained, and it's like what Neil just mentioned too. I mean, yeah, I mean, that straw, I mean, you can start tasting paper. Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
And there are also people with sensory difficulties or sensory needs that can't handle having a straw made of paper in their mouth. And that's not just a preference, it's an actual accessibility need, right? There's a lot of reasons. And as for like the social reasons that I'm talking about, I really firmly believe that it's discrimination to expect a member of an oppressed or marginalized community to pay more to access services that everyone else gets for free. So like the whole idea of like a disability tax, right? Where if I go to McDonald's, I shouldn't have to pay an extra $1 for my pop by buying myself a plastic or a metal or a glass straw and bringing it along with me when everyone else gets to just buy their pop for the regular price. Like accessibility is about affordability. And also people with disabilities on average have access to less income than non-disabled people do. So the disability tax is even more discriminatory in that sense.
Absolutely.
And there's also like, if someone like me has difficulty drinking without a straw, it's, you know, very likely that we have difficulty cleaning a straw at home as well. And there's there's this thing that I like to refer to as the diaper bag effect, that like, that's probably not the greatest term for it, but that's what I call it, where like, it's the easiest way to explain to non-disabled people what my experience is like when I leave the house. And it's like, if you think about a mother with a young child or a person with a young child, every time they leave the house, even just for a 20-minute coffee meetup with a friend, they have to get the stroller, they have to get a change of clothes and a nappy and, you know, diapers and an extra bottle, and make sure they have formula and make sure they have things for if someone throws up, and make sure they brought extra toys. And it's just every single small excursion turns into this huge thing that you have to plan for and bring all this stuff along, even if it's just a short excursion. And that's my experience too, as someone who's disabled and a wheelchair user. Every time I leave the house, I already have to bring so many things that nobody else has to think of. Asking me to add a straw to that is really not all that ethically sound of an option.
Well, yeah, and I mean, like, I know, like, where I live, we have a new tax that's been put on too onto drinks. So that's another burden also on top of it, on top of plastic straws. Now you got to pay for a sugary tax, you know. So yeah, I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, you know, then they charge you an environmental fee, you know, disposable cups. So if you bring it back in, we can allow maybe a little discount of some kind. But I mean, it's ridiculous, eh?
But can you imagine, like, me on crutches bringing back a whole garbage bag full of bottles to my depot?
Yeah.
It's so easy to jump on a bus with crutches with a huge bag of plastic bottles,
Well, it's like milk. Yeah, it's like milk containers. Now they're charging a deposit. So I went, like, I know Lorelei, like you don't have like a Save on Foods out there, but in BC, in BC and Alberta, they have a Save on Foods. That's a multi-billion-dollar corporation, but yeah, it's like a superstore kind of, right? So so anyway, so they have milk on sale. It says $5.19. Well, why don't they just say $5.39? Because what they do now is they charge now, they never did before, a deposit, a 10-cent deposit for that milk, a 4-liter jug, and then they charge you another 9 cents for an environmental fee, what you don't get back. And who, like Neil makes a good point. Who's going to be hauling all this stuff all the way down to a recycle place where maybe it's an accessibility issue, like halfway across the city, and then find that long lineup. Then they wonder why people just throw them out, right? Of course, it gets recycled into a bin, but now you're throwing away that money. I mean, and all these straws, same thing. Like, I mean, it's ridiculous.
I'm a huge advocate of the fact that accessibility has to take affordability into account, not just because we on average have access to less income, but also just, in general, we have to pay for so many extra things just to live our lives and exist. Like, I work in video game development, as my job is a digital accessibility specialist, so I work on making video games more accessible to people with disabilities. And if someone who's non-disabled goes out and buys an Xbox, for example, they can go home that day and play that Xbox. They had to save up, $300 or whatever to buy that Xbox. But then someone with a disability who needs to use an Xbox adaptive controller has to then go out and spend another $200 on that controller. And then they have to spend $80 per switch button to plug into that controller. And then they have to pay for hardware to mount those switches onto their wheelchair or other assistive devices. And then they have to pay someone to do that if they can't do it themselves. To have the same experience as everyone else, we often are having to pay so much more money. And people without disabilities don't always realize that. So even though it seems small to ask us to go out and purchase our own metal straws and bring them along, it's not small because it adds up.
So what are your solutions, Lorelei, as to what should happen to be more environmentally conscious then?
So for me, I believe that there are just such better things for us to ban for the environment than straws. I care a lot about the environment. And I've been involved in a lot of different, protests and different initiatives as an activist for the environment. But, straws happen to have gained a lot of social media attention in recent years. So they're the thing that everyone's focusing on because, Tom Brady is talking about it and Kim Kardashian thinks that plastic straws are bad. And it's now not only ethically and environmentally an issue, it's also become a trend to not use plastic straws. And there's graphic images all over Facebook of dying sea turtles and things like that. But in reality, plastic straws don't actually make up much of our waste at all. There are numerous studies about this. Single-use water bottles make up far more plastic waste than plastic straws. Even just the lids from single-use plastic water bottles. And then there are things like oil pipelines and carbon emissions and Amazon packaging and these large corporations making things as cheaply as they possibly can that are doing far more harm to the environment with their daily practices than accessibility devices. And I wish we could just focus our attention there instead, because billionaires are currently lining their pockets with the slow destruction of our planet, and instead of being upset about that, we're focusing on taking an accessibility device away from disabled people that doesn't even make up a small amount of the real plastic waste happening.